This is the Happy Dev Podcast with me, James Brooks. Happy New Year and welcome to episode 5 of Happy Dev. This week, I'm speaking with Jason McCreary, also known as JMac or @Gondark on Twitter. JMac has been a developer for 20 years and in that time has created many projects, including Laravel Shift. JMac is also an author. He wrote BaseCode for practices on improving the code you write. And he also produces the video course Confident Laravel. JMac, can you tell us about you as a person outside of development?
Outside of development, I like to travel. I'm a big foodie. I eat a lot of food. It's kind of surprising I'm not 500 pounds. I guess, I'm pretty active, I like physical projects. I think they're a good balance with all the mental that happens with programming. So I like, working outdoors or, camping or woodworking or things of that nature. So
let's start by talking about your experiences with mental health. When did they start and how did they manifest for you?
Wow. Definitely there have been a few points over the, career of programming for almost 20 years now, or I think it has been 20 years, maybe more. But I definitely came across multiple times where I had some burnout, and kind of had to figure out ways to deal with that. And I'm definitely better about that now, but it took 2 or 3 kind of heavy instances of that to really learn how to kind of deal with it and prevent it, in some cases. And but kind of generally, I'll deal with what I feel is probably pretty maybe standard, for kind of knowledge working, irritability, isolation, things like that.
And how do they affect you day to day?
Day to day is probably not so bad, and like I said, I've learned to maybe kind of see these things coming. So I do my best again to try to control them, but obviously that's a slippery slope because it kind of makes it that much worse when you can't really control it. And then it kind of gets the best of you, for a day or two or something, and it, it's just hard. So, but I think with irritability, for example, that's probably one that is pretty consistent for me. And I think it happens because, as a programmer, the whole goal is to get in the zone, right? And just, you get in this flow, you're plugged in, you're jacked in, and you're coding and just these really intense thought problems, right? And that's great when it's all working out. But when that doesn't work out, maybe you've reached a problem that is too much of a challenge for that particular day, and you're just not seeing the solution, or maybe you can't get in the zone for external reasons. It's too loud, or coworkers are interrupting you, or even just your girlfriend is interrupting you. And it's not their fault at all. It's just it's just life. Life is interrupting you.
Yeah, you almost need lights above you to say, I'm busy, I'm not busy.
Yeah, like a little recording light, if you will. It's funny that you mentioned that. I actually do that. I actually have a little light. My office is in the basement, in my home office. And if I'm on a call like this one or something, I actually put it's like a little night light, like a little push button night light. I'll put it outside the office just so
That's a good
she
idea.
knows.
No interruptions.
Yeah. But the problem is that when there are interruptions, that's when I haven't transitioned from that plugged in, that intensity that was positively being applied to writing code and solving problems is now turned into social intensity.
Yeah.
And it normally comes out negatively, and I despite my best efforts, and that's one I'm pretty aware of, and I think I feel bad about it, so it definitely weighs on me mentally when that happens.
Not that I know you personally, JMac, but I get the impression that you're a pretty chill guy. So I think the irritability is only because you're trying to express yourself, which happens to be with a keyboard, and then it's like somebody's just pulled that keyboard away mid line of code. And I think it would be the same for a writer if they're, I don't know, using a pen, for instance, then having the pen ripped out from you, and you've got all these things that you're trying to get out, but you're not able to. And I think irritability is something that just kind of happens in that scenario.
Yeah, it just weighs on you, and as humans, like, if we're not always super, super self-aware or like super self-control, like, that's going to come out again in maybe some odd ways, and maybe something I say in a response that has a little zing on it, or just something, and it normally goes away. But it ways in which I've kind of learned to combat that is, normally I'll try to, when I do have the time, when I'm not like, like you said, when the keyboard's not yanked away. I mean, those times are unfortunately probably a bit inevitable, but other times I try to help by ending the day with a transitional task, whether it's just organizing my to-do list for tomorrow, or maybe reading, a blog post, just something to kind of turn the engines off,
Yeah, just change the pace and
exactly. And when the weather's nice or something, I'll do that. And even more of a positive, I'll do it with a run, or a bike, or when I lived in New York City, I kind of had that built in because the public transportation commute home gave you a good 30 minutes of walking and just kind of light interaction with humans.
How did you find the pace of? I've only visited New York once, and I found the pace like it's just always go. In my when I was in my hotel, there was people like roadworks being done and a pneumatic drill going off at 5 a.m., which does not happen here. How do you think that? Did you find that the New York lifestyle affected you differently?
Oddly enough, no, and I think maybe because some of those things were built in, in kind of unseen ways, like. I didn't have a car. Like that would be crazy, intense to have a car in New York City. So I mean,
just asking for stress.
Yeah, exactly. That would be so stressful in my mind. So like everything was public transportation, and so you're walking to the station, you're walking from the station to work, you're walking to lunch, you're walking back to the station. So it's just those things gave me time built in at the beginning and the end of the day to kind of prep for the day mentally, but also unwind from the stresses of the day. And other things, the city that never sleeps kind of thing, and every day's trash day, like, they just didn't, I don't know, after a while, they don't bother you.
You mentioned earlier about noticing periods of burnout in yourself. What is it that you look for that you can identify as, this is going to be burnout, I need to do something now?
That's a good question. I think for me personally, it's being able to recognize two things. Diminishing return is probably the first and quickest one to recognize.
And by that, you mean putting in a lot of effort but not getting anything out, or?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the day after Christmas, I had some time, and we were all just sitting around, PJs basically, just the fallout aftermath of family gatherings. And I thought, okay, well, let me just fire up the computer. Even though earlier in the week I'd told myself, just take 2 days, take 2 days, and answer emails and stuff, but don't worry about coding. And it was like, it was the wrong choice. It was one of those things where I knew in my mind that, like, despite something sounding like a simple task, like, if you're not, or myself at least, if I'm not mentally prepared for it, I could spend 3 hours on something that takes 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And as for me, that's way worse. 'Cause time is like the most valuable thing to me, which also can create stress. So when something's not flowing, again, when I'm not in that flow, it becomes that vicious cycle now of like, now I'm irritable because this shouldn't be taking so long, and like, I knew I shouldn't have opened the computer, and I have that inner monologue just working against me and just pecking.
Do you find that you need to, in that scenario that you've started it, you need to finish it, or are you able to walk away from it when you recognize?
I've learned how to walk away, and the funny, I guess the unfortunate truth of that is I think that really only can happen with lots and lots of experiences of failure. So it's easier said than done, absolutely. Because years ago, I can totally admit I never would have been able to walk away. I would have, just made everyone else around me like go away, or I'd go hide in a corner and like finish this thing. And now I can make, a to-do bullet point or just a sentence or two brain dump in a to-do comment of like where I left off, what I think it is, pick it up in the morning kind of thing. And normally in the morning, I'll fix it in 15 minutes. Like I've learned to let my brain work on autopilot because, it happens. It does for all of us, even more so for knowledge workers. Like you can wake up in the middle of the night and...
I was just going to say that's a common thing. You're just like, you wake up and you're like, oh, what an idiot. But you don't know why you were thinking about that. It's just subconscious.
Yeah. So like the other day, the issue, I knew it was, I was rebuilding some servers for Shift. Just getting up to date, PHP 7.4 and MySQL 8 and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to add another queue worker and all these things. And I thought, oh, I'll get on DigitalOcean and spin one up. This will take several minutes. And I was having issues with IP and DNS, and I couldn't get the right, package manager to bring in the latest 7.4, and everything was just a challenge. And I said, you know what? This is all just like a permissions issue and a focus issue. I'm just going to write it. I'm going to chalk it up to that. And I'm going to come back to it in the morning. And in the morning, I had all three of them running in under an hour. So
it's frustrating, but so rewarding when you recognize that I needed to walk away. I'm glad I walked away, but my damn it, I should have been able to do it when I set out to do it. But it doesn't work like that, does it? Unfortunately.
No, and I think the best you can do is recognize it, because if you keep doing that, it kind of leads to the second thing, which is, or ultimately leads to burnout. And I think that's where the second piece comes in, which is kind of knowing your limits. And I've learned them, the hard way multiple times, that like there's certain amounts of work or there's certain projects that I just can't take on, not even necessarily computer work. Sometimes it's a woodworking project I want to do, or I want to, the car's got some, damage, and I was a big gear hand, in high school. And so I just like, I can fix it. And it's just kind of like, but it's not worth my time, Experience is probably the biggest tool that we have or weapon even to combat like burnout and these types of things that I'm talking about. And by definition, it means that it takes experience them a few times. I remember when I built an iOS app, and it was pretty successful, but there was an issue with it. There was a bug in production, and because of the iOS approval process, I had to get very creative. It dealt with March Madness, which is a college basketball tournament in March. And once the tournament starts, it's not like I can call up the NCAA and say, hey guys, can you pause your, $1 billion, sports campaign? I've got a bug in my app. Like the games are playing, minute by minute, multiple games. And there was a bug in this system. And gosh, it was killing me. It was killing the experience. The bracket scores weren't adding up correctly when the games, and every time a game would finish, it would spawn off this job that just crushed everything again. It crashed the server. It calculated the scores wrong. Only half were calculated. It was just terrible. And I had to knuckle down and say, I got to fix that. I could walk away from this and fail, and just say, oh, well, it didn't work. Or I could stand by it and, figure out a fix and, know though that the fix wasn't going to be the ideal fix. I think that was also an additional challenge because, we always want to architect something the best as developers. And, sometimes that's just not possible. Like the ideal way to do it isn't available, whether it's time or budget or whatever. So the point is that when you throw in these extra constraints, it definitely adds more stress, and it leads to that burnout or maybe just that lack of will to do it, And but But anyways, I had to power through it. And I came out on the other side really happy because I, was able to solve the problem in a creative way given the limitations. I did the right thing in my opinion by answering. I think I answered like 137 support emails, like for that, and like a couple, and just not copy paste. Like everyone was like authentic and real. I think other times were, younger, I used to take on more client work than I do now. Now I'm pretty selective, which I think is a good thing. It's also a fortunate thing, but when I was younger, I took on everything. Oh, got an uncle that needs a website, I'll do it. They know this law, someone knows a law firm and they want a little splash page, I'll do it.
I think one of the best skills that you can learn ideally early on is to be able to say no. It definitely comes with experience, like you say, but knowing that you're able to say no to a job and you've got all these things coming in and being aware of your own mental health is definitely one of the best things that you can do. I first heard about you at Laracon US in 2016, and you gave your practicing YAGNI talk. YAGNI being you aren't going to need it. Do you think that developers in general sometimes bring stress upon themselves by wanting features that we don't actually need up front?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just human nature, and I think it's even compounded a bit more, especially, for America, like just kind of with our society, like materialistic and so forth. Like I'm a bit of a minimalist, by nature. So I think it's sometimes even just because of that a bit easier for me to not really think about needing it. And again, that experience helps knowing where I can cut corners because I've seen that it worked out. It was scary those first 2 or 3 times, but 4 or 5, 6 times later, it's like, no, it'll work. And, and yeah, there's definitely ways to poke holes at both sides. Like you could say, well, you got lucky that it worked. Maybe you're right, and you could also say, no, we really need this. Like this feature, it might not be something that's used, but it's going to give it that bit of polish that maybe just adds that wow factor that gets more people in the door. So there's difficult arguments on both sides that do take a bit of, guesswork about it. But I think for the most part, absolutely, yes. Developers definitely, in my opinion, have a tendency far more on the side of, requiring things that aren't needed, or doing things in a way that make life initially harder. But it's very difficult because you just don't know until the future. And so I think I said it in the talk, I've learned that future me is smarter, and I've grown confident in that. And I think that really only comes with experience.
I can openly admit to being one of those people that starts a project and then gets overwhelmed with all of the things that need to get done and then moving on to another project. And if you're becoming scared of doing the work, take a step back. Like if you've not committed to anything and it's just a side project, it doesn't matter if it takes you a year, 6 months, 20 years, whatever. Like if you've got a project and you want to work on it and you can use it as an opportunity to learn things, don't put all of these things in front of you and go, well, I've got to work through all of these. Just build it. Just build it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think on the surface, like cutting corners probably makes some people cringe. Like it again, even me, like I'm just kind of like, it's not really cutting corners. It's not the best description. It's more like being strategic. It's find a strategy that works for you. I mean, Taylor talks about he actually likes to jump in and tackle the hardest part first, like checkbox this thing that might end up being that show-stopping challenge later and see what the plan of attack is going to be, right? That's one strategy. Another strategy would be start with a simple thing to get the ball rolling. It's all about your state of mind and what works for you, but keep it positive, right? If you enjoy that onset of a challenge, then start Taylor's way. If it's better for you to get a little momentum to get in that zone, get plugged in, get the ball rolling, then find something real easy and just see where it takes you, But, make it a choice, make it a positive choice, not like how did I end up here? Oh my gosh, I got to code out of here.
As a single founder, and a very busy one at that, what stresses do you have in your work life?
Probably, maybe the biggest strain, just kind of being a solo dev, single founder, is maybe just isolation. Sometimes I think it's easy. It's easy for devs in general. Again, just having that like constant relationship with the computer, like that's, in a kind of a dreary viewpoint. Like our biggest relationship in our life is going to be with the keyboard. Like, it's just kind of, that's grim. But the point is, when that relationship isn't going so well, like none of the other ones around you. So I think I have trouble with that, which we can see and draw direct lines to the other things, burnout and irritability and so forth. He took my keyboard away. But isolation's a big one, and that can be tough sometimes when I'm in like full on, dev mode on a new product. Maybe I'm making the Confident Laravel course, and you're really in the zone. But at the same time, you have to kind of follow in the footsteps of like Adam Wathan. You want to work in the open. You want to make sure you're on Twitter, but it's a double-edged sword too, because like you don't want to take away focus from building. You want to get a lot of videos made, in a day, or I want to get a lot of tweaks to shift or something. But I'm also like needing to jump out on Twitter, and I want to craft a really great tweet, a really hot tip, and then you go work some more, and then you come back to it, and like, you've got one like.
Yeah,
and it's just
I was going
like,
to say that the there's a double-edged sword within that as well, because Twitter can be great for exposure and marketing, but at the same time you can get a lot of negativity, you can read too much into not getting any feedback from it and thinking, well, what I've just said is useless, nobody cares. Like, there's many things that I read that I don't retweet, that I don't like. I just like, oh yeah, that's useful, and then scroll by it. It's too easy to, and I think people forget that
it's definitely a bit of a one-way communication, and it's absolutely necessary. And I definitely like Twitter. It's my main source of not just reaching friends and followers, but also, like you said, consuming information as well. And it's just, but the problem is, I think, or the challenge with it is, it can be very isolating when you look at it from a need perspective. I need more retweets, or I need more, awareness on this tweet. Like, when you put the pressure on the system in a way, it really starts to show a bit of its negative side. It's isolation, it's mob mentality, it's clicks and so forth. Like, it's definitely, it can be tough in those moments, especially when you're trying to create and build and do something new, but also kind of that human nature of like wanting to have recognition for it, wanting to get it out there. It can be real hard.
On the subject of isolation and you being a single founder, what do you do outside of Twitter to keep you sane? Not having the colleagues around and having the day-to-day chit-chat, how was your weekend, here are my plans, what you're doing for Christmas. Do you do groups? Do you go to the gym? What kind of things do you do to keep yourself in touch with people?
Yeah, that's actually probably something that leads to my feeling of isolation sometimes. I haven't been the best. I transitioned to this kind of full-time on my own projects, completely at home, remote, so to speak, a year ago. And I really haven't like figured out some of those connections all that well. I haven't been very good at like even something simple like just working from a coffee shop, because again, I know me sometimes, and when I want to get a lot done in a day, I don't want to risk that irritability of coffee shop noises and so forth. anyways, the point of all that is just kind of like, that's probably something I need to focus a little more on in the new year, is making sure that I have some better ties to being social beyond, Twitter and email. I do a pretty good job of pairing, but it's still remote. So, occasionally I'll jump on a remote pairing session with different people. I have a network of a couple people, that I try to do that with. But it's not every day, so there's definitely a couple days in a row where other than, girlfriend or family or something, I don't necessarily have a lot of connection to the human world. So yeah, that's something I should probably focus on a bit more, because that definitely promotes, mental health and just health in general. So that's a tough one for me, I think, sometimes, and definitely feeds into the issue. I mean, I definitely have friends and stuff that we do a game night, or, we go out to the movie, and I come from a large family, so I have some brothers and that, I can do stuff with, and we're relatively close in age, so it works, whether if we just go up to the bar or something, or we get together and watch the game. So, there are all those things in place, but day to day, I probably should do a better job of maybe finding on occasion a co-working space, or getting back out to some meetups, some more. That's something in New York I did a lot. Louisville doesn't have as large of a tech, or at least not an open source tech community. Our biggest meetup group's probably like the .NET meetup group, and I don't write a lot of .NET, but occasionally I'll go when it seems to be more of like a generic topic. Just to get out and be among other developers. So
yeah, it's really important to do that. My wife always says that, because I work from home as well, my wife says that by the time she gets home from work, I'm just there like constantly pecking at her, like, saw this and this and this and this happened, and like, I'm sure I'm not that bad.
Yeah. I can definitely tell. I'll do that too sometimes. Like, if there's a day or two in a row where it's kind of just been me at home, I can definitely tell on occasion, we'll get to dinner time or something, and I'm just like motor mouthing something. I don't, I pick up on it on occasion. So I definitely do the same thing. And I'm sure, it's all the same, again, it's kind of just demonstration that everyone faces these challenges. Doesn't matter what type of job it is. Like, maybe that was the day she just needed some decompression time. And I'm over here, I was on Twitter earlier, and did you see this? And did you see this? And I read this blog post, and we should go do this. And some days it's her doing that to me, and I didn't finish what I wanted to finish, and so I'm in one of those irritable moods, and I'm just like, okay, can we talk about this later?
All comes down to communication, I guess, but it's so hard sometimes, and recognizing that.
Absolutely.
I have this final question for everyone. What makes you a happy dev?
What makes me a happy dev? Ooh, that's a good one. I like seeing when I was able to like help somebody, like whether it was Shift or a tweet. But it really helps me, or it really kind of makes me happy about something. When there's just a bit more context about it, like it's not just a retweet or a heart or a like or whatever. It's answering one of the feedback emails that I send from Shift, and like there's real substance in there. It's not simply, just like, love Shift, worked great. Like, it's something where they're like, we had this old project and we had been dreading it for years, and it's still on 4.2, and we used Shift, and there's you got us there. Like, there's light at the end of the tunnel, where there's some bugs to fix, and where we needed to replace this package, but like, it's all about that momentum, right? Like, it gave them that momentum to get started and see the light, and not have it be a stressful thing, but a positive thing, because they were armed with this service, that could help them keep that ball moving, so that context, like when those things happen, I feel like, the opposite of the isolation. I feel happy that, it's there, and it could be a tweet. of just like, oh, I never really was that great with Git from the command line, or I never wrote a lot of tests for my Laravel app, but now I do. And when I make a change, like I totally understand the whole confident Laravel phrase now. Like it just gives me that confidence because I have these tests, right? And it's all just experience. Like sometimes you don't know. So despite the selling or the pushing or the social media hot tips or whatever, it's just kind of like to see it have that effect. I think that's where I'm happiest. Those emails that I answer or something, like even when it starts negative and I do a few support emails, a few back and forths, and they're like, oh, okay, I see. And, you kind of converted them even. Like that's when it's like, okay, great, good. I connected with someone.
Well, that brings us to the end of episode 5. What you at home don't know is that this is the second time we've recorded this episode because it started two recordings in. We finally made it, JMac. And I really appreciate you from coming on and sharing your story and tips.
No problem. No, it was fun.
And that wraps it up. We will see you next time. Goodbye.